famous high-level bridge of Alberta. It's also known as the Lethbridge Viaduct, and according to Wikipedia, it's a railway trestle by any other name, and famous for, well, being tall and long. Before we get to that, though, we should probably do some basic housekeeping, and that means we'll dive down the rabbit hole of definitions. Is this thing a trestle? Well, according to Wikipedia, kinda, sorta. Is it a bridge? Absolute. A viaduct? Check and check. So what's the difference? And well, why should we really care? And while we're at the subject, just how exactly do they get the gooey caramel into Cadbury caramel bars anyway? The first thing to consider is that names are not always correctly indicative of the thing, whatever the thing may be. Places the world over are famous for that. For example, there is a town in Germany called Uffendorf. The name literally means monkey town, and when I checked last, it has a population of literally 0 simian specimens, including the likes of this guy. The only primates therein are of the Teutonic variety, and they can't be bothered to explain the origin of the name to anyone that measures things by football fields or furlongs per fortnight. But I digress. The same also applies to structures. The name given the thing may not have been chosen by the engineers that worked on the thing. An example of this would be the Indiana Railroad's Tulip Trestle in, well, Indiana, which is technically a viaduct. The term bridge is a generic description for a structure that carries transportation infrastructure over an obstruction. Being the nerds that they are, railroad engineers define their bridges by types of span. So to that end, trestles and viaducts are types of bridges. Stay with me, this only gets worse. Viaducts cross great distances with towers supporting longer spans at substantially higher elevations than ground or water level. By contrast, a trestle comprises a series of short spans supported by bents or piles that can vary greatly in both length and height, from small bridges over streams to massive frameworks crossing deep valleys. Now that we have that out of the way, this thing is clearly a viaduct. Someone should probably tell the Wikipedians about this. Remember, boys and girls, always verify your sources. Anywho, the Lethbridge Viaduct was built between 1907 and 1909 by the Canadian Pacific Railway, is the largest railway structure in Canada, the largest of its type in the world, and is still maintained and used over a century later. It spans what used to be called the Belly River, which, for well reasons, was eventually renamed the Oldman River, which, regardless of whatever you choose to call it, can be found at the bottom of one of Lethbridge's many coulees. The structure is 1,623 meters, or for anyone that thinks in speed in terms of quarter miles at a time, a mere 9,016.67 boxes of original craft dinner long. It towers over the Oldman River at a height of 96 meters, and is built out of some 11,200 tons of steel. Total cost at the time came in at an eye-watering $1,334,525 Canadian. And that included the 7,600 gallons of paint needed to coat it fully, twice. Oddly enough, it wasn't designed in Western Canada. CPR had a department of bridges in Montreal, Quebec, and the crack team of francophones outdid themselves to get it done. Once the ink had dried on the drawings and everyone was happy with the design, construction began in the summer of 1907, directed by CPR's Assistant Chief Engineer John Edward Schwitzer. Just as a side point, his name is Germanic in nature, and it means sweaty guy. It's a good thing that the internet isn't forever. Anyways, the clearing and grading of the site, construction of the piers, and placement of the footings progressed while the steelwork was being prefabricated out of province. This was done by the Canadian Bridge Company of Walkerville, Ontario. Raising the steelwork began in mid-August 1908 and was performed by around 100 workers. Transportation of the steel to the site required some 645 railway cars, while another 40 were needed to bring in equipment, lunch boxes, and sundry supplies. Prior to building the Lethbridge Viaduct, CPR's route from Lethbridge to Fort Macleod was through the Crow's Nest Pass, which was a route that required some 37 curves and at least 22 wooden trestles that spanned the St. Mary River, 8-mile coulee, 16-mile coulee, amongst others. You know, the mind positively boggles at the sheer originality of place names in Alberta, And don't get me started on some town named Vulcan. Moving on. These trestles were only designed to last about 10 years, and the average railway grade of 1.2% was problematic for the older trains. In 1905, the bean counters at the CPR finally decided that they had enough of retreading trestles and came up with a new route that ran to the north of the Oldman River. It required 2 bridges, one in Lethbridge and the second located west of the town of Monarch. This reduced the grade to a less problematic 0.4% and saved almost 10 kilometers of track. It is currently maintained by the CPKC, or Canadian Pacific Kansas City Limited, a railway company that resulted from a merger when CPR bought Kansas City Southern back in 2023 to the tune of $31 billion US. A lesser-known fact about this new conglomerate is that they are the only single-line railway ever to connect 3 countries, and they operate a combined total of 32,000 kilometers of railway in Canada, Mexico, and the US of A. Not really sure if that helped you get through your day or not, but you can bust that factoid out if you ever want to impress your railfan friends. So if you're ever in Lethbridge, take the opportunity to visit the viaduct. The parklands are beautiful, there's lots to do, and some cornball named Kelly even gives the place 2 thumbs up. And as always, thanks for watching.